You stop being unforgettable the moment you become easy to edit. It happens in small ways at first. You laugh at something that did not feel funny. You soften an opinion because the room might not like it. You hide your intensity. You shrink your standards. You choose the safer sentence, the more acceptable face, the version of yourself that causes the least discomfort in other people. And for a while, it works. People approve. The room stays calm. Nobody rejects you. But something inside you begins to disappear. The strange thing is that most people do not lose their power because they are weak. They lose it because they become too skilled at being accepted. They learn how to read the room so well that they stop hearing themselves. They become polished, agreeable, careful, harmless, and slowly they start confusing being liked with being real. The more honest question is this: are you becoming more yourself, or are you becoming easier for others to handle? Stoicism was never about becoming emotionless or invisible. Marcus Aurelius did not write about self-command so that a person could erase his own soul. The Stoic path is not a life without presence. It is a life where your presence is no longer ruled by fear, approval, impulse, or the need to perform. It is the discipline of becoming inwardly free enough to be honest, steady, and deeply human, without needing everyone to understand you. Because silent power is not loud dominance, it is not trying to impress the room. It is not becoming cold, mysterious, or untouchable. Silent power is the energy of a person who has stopped negotiating with his own truth. Someone who can grow without becoming fake. Someone who can admit his flaws without drowning in shame. Someone who can love deeply without begging to be chosen. Someone whose standards are calm, clear, and real. And those people are unforgettable, not because they demand attention, but because they carry something most people have abandoned: a center. You feel it when they enter a room. They are not performing. They are not chasing approval. They are not leaking their worth into every reaction around them. They can be kind without being weak, intense without being chaotic, loving without being desperate, present without needing to prove anything. This episode is about 7 Stoic habits that help you become that kind of person. Not louder, not harder, not more impressive in a shallow way, but more real, more grounded, more difficult to manipulate, more loyal to the truth of who you are becoming. Because the world may remember your words for a moment, but it remembers your presence much longer. And that presence begins with one quiet decision: to stop being a filtered version of yourself. 1. Stop being a filtered version of yourself. The first habit is to stop being a filtered version of yourself, because nothing quietly weakens your presence more than living as a performance. At first, the performance may look harmless. You adjust your tone so people do not misunderstand you. You hide what you really think because the room feels too fragile for honesty. You act less passionate, less serious, less unusual, less direct, less alive, because some part of you has learned that approval often comes when you become easier to manage. And because this adjustment is rewarded, you start calling it maturity. You call it emotional intelligence. You call it being realistic. But sometimes what you call maturity is only fear wearing better language. The Stoics cared deeply about living according to nature, and that idea is often misunderstood. It does not mean obeying every impulse or saying every thought without discipline. It means living in alignment with what is true, what is rational, and what belongs to your character. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself again and again not to be pulled away from his own nature by the noise of other people. In simple terms, the work is not to become whatever the crowd rewards. The work is to become what your conscience can respect. And this is where many people lose themselves. They do not lie in obvious ways. They lie in small social edits. They say yes when the honest answer is no. They laugh when something inside them feels uncomfortable. They agree with people they do not respect because disagreement might cost warmth. They present a version of themselves that is always calm, always pleasant, always acceptable, while the real self sits somewhere behind the mask, waiting to breathe. The problem is that a mask may protect you from rejection, but it also blocks real connection. People may like the version you perform, but you will still feel unseen, because somewhere inside you know they are not responding to the whole truth of you. They are responding to the edited version, the safe version, the version that learned how to survive by disappearing in pieces. This is why authenticity has to be practiced with discipline. It is not an excuse to become rude, careless, or uncontrolled. Being real does not mean spilling every emotion into every room. It means your outer life stops constantly betraying your inner truth. It means you can be respectful without being fake. You can be kind without becoming shapeless. You can adapt without abandoning yourself. Start with small honesty. Say what you actually prefer. Admit when something does not work for you. Stop pretending to enjoy conversations, habits, or environments that drain the life out of you. Let your face become a little more truthful. Let your words become a little less designed for approval. Let silence replace the performance when the performance would cost you self-respect. At first, this may feel uncomfortable because the filtered version of you may have kept you safe for a long time. It helped you avoid conflict. It helped you stay accepted. It helped you move through rooms where honesty did not always feel welcome. So do not hate that version. Understand it. Thank it for helping you survive. Then begin leading yourself beyond it. Because the goal is not to become acceptable to everyone. The goal is to become recognizable to yourself. And when you stop being a filtered version of yourself, something powerful returns. Your presence becomes cleaner. Your words carry more weight. Your energy becomes less scattered because you are no longer spending so much of yourself managing how everyone receives you. That is when silent power begins, not when everyone approves of you, but when you no longer abandon yourself to earn approval. The second habit is to grow without losing the core of who you are, because not every version of improvement is actually a return to yourself. Sometimes people change in ways that look impressive from the outside, but feel strangely empty on the inside. They become more disciplined, more successful, more polished, more socially acceptable, but somewhere in the process, they lose the quiet truth that once made them alive. Growth can become another mask if you are not careful. It happens when you begin improving yourself for the wrong audience. You start building a body, not because you respect your health, but because you want to be desired. You chase success, not because the work matters to you, but because you want to finally feel superior to the people who overlooked you. You become calmer, not because you have found peace, but because you are afraid of being seen as emotional. And slowly, the self-development that was supposed to free you becomes a more elegant form of performance. The Stoics believed in discipline, but not as a way to become someone artificial. For them, discipline was meant to bring a person closer to reason, virtue, and inner order. Marcus Aurelius kept returning to this question in his own way. Am I living according to what is worthy, or am I being pulled away by praise, fear, pleasure, and reputation? That question matters because growth without values can make you stronger in the wrong direction. You can outgrow old habits without outgrowing your soul. There is a difference between maturity and self-erasure. Maturity means you stop letting every impulse lead you. You become more patient. You choose your words with more care. You take responsibility for your patterns. You become harder to provoke and easier to trust. But self-erasure is different. Self-erasure is when you kill your depth to look calm. You hide your sensitivity to look strong. You abandon your creativity to look practical. You trade your inner truth for a version of yourself that wins approval, but no longer feels like home. This is why conscious growth requires self-honesty. Before you change, ask yourself, am I becoming more whole or just more acceptable? That question can protect you from chasing a false version of strength. Because some people do not want you healed. They want you convenient. They want you quiet enough to avoid discomfort, flexible enough to meet their expectations, and polished enough to never disturb the image they have of you. But your life was not given to you so you could become a more manageable person. Your growth should make you more responsible, not less real. So keep the core. Keep the values that make you respect yourself when no one is watching. Keep the tenderness that lets you care deeply, but guide it with boundaries. Keep the ambition that pushes you forward, but cleanse it of bitterness. Keep the intensity that makes you alive, but train it so it does not burn everything around you. Keep your truth, but give it discipline, patience, and form. Start noticing where your growth is coming from. If it comes from shame, it will make you harsh. If it comes from revenge, it will make you restless. If it comes from comparison, it will make you insecure no matter how far you go. But if it comes from self-respect, it will make you steady. It will feel less like running away from who you were, and more like becoming faithful to who you were meant to be. Because the goal is not to become a stranger with better habits. The goal is to become yourself, with more courage, more discipline, and fewer excuses. And when you grow without losing your core, people feel something rare in you. They feel change without falseness, strength without emptiness, maturity without the death of your spirit. That kind of growth is unforgettable. The third habit is to own your flaws without shame, because the parts of you that you keep hiding often have more power over you than the parts you are willing to face. Most people do not struggle only because they have flaws. Everyone has flaws. They struggle because they are ashamed of having them. They spend so much energy trying to look untouched, unscarred, uncomplicated, emotionally perfect, morally polished, and always in control. They try to present a version of themselves that has never been wounded, never been insecure, never been jealous, never been afraid, never made a mistake that still hurts to remember. But the more you hide your humanity, the less real your presence becomes. And people can feel that. They may not know exactly what is missing, but they can sense when someone is performing perfection. There is a distance in it, a carefulness, a lack of warmth. Because a person who is terrified of being seen is always editing himself in real time. He cannot fully listen because part of him is managing the image. He cannot fully connect because part of him is protecting the mask. He cannot fully stand in his power because somewhere inside he still believes that if people saw the whole truth, they would leave. Carl Jung called this hidden side of the self the shadow, not because it is evil, but because it contains the parts of us we pushed out of awareness, the shame, anger, insecurity, fear, hunger, tenderness, weakness, and truth we did not know how to carry. And Jung's insight was not that we should worship the shadow or let it control us. It was that what we refuse to face does not disappear. It leaks out. It becomes projection. It becomes defensiveness. It becomes emotional overreaction. It becomes the strange need to judge in others what we cannot accept in ourselves. This is why owning your flaws is not weakness. It is integration. It is the moment you stop letting shame govern the hidden rooms of your life. You can say, "Yes, I have been insecure here. Yes, I have reacted from fear. Yes, I have wanted approval too badly. Yes, I have made mistakes." Not as a confession that destroys you, but as a truth that frees you from pretending. The Stoics would recognize this as a form of self-command. Marcus Aurelius did not write as a man trying to appear flawless. He wrote as a man correcting himself, examining himself, returning himself to what was worthy. There is strength in that kind of honesty. Not the dramatic honesty that announces every wound to the world, but the private honesty that says, "I see myself clearly, and I am still responsible for what I become." Owning your flaws does not mean using them as an excuse. It does not mean saying, "This is just who I am," and asking everyone else to suffer around your unhealed patterns. That is not self-acceptance. That is avoidance. Real self-acceptance tells the truth and then asks for growth. It says, "This is part of my story, but it does not get to run my life unchecked." So begin with one thing you have been hiding from yourself. Not something you need to announce publicly, just something you need to stop denying internally. Maybe it is your fear of rejection. Maybe it is your anger. Maybe it is the insecurity beneath your confidence. Maybe it is the grief you keep turning into productivity. Look at it without making it your whole identity. Let it be information. Let it be human. Let it become a place where maturity can begin. Because the people who are most unforgettable are rarely the ones who look perfect. They are the ones who feel whole. They have scars, but the scars are no longer begging to be hidden. They have flaws, but the flaws are no longer secretly driving the car. They have pain, but the pain has been given meaning, discipline, and dignity. And when you own your flaws without shame, you stop living like the truth of you is something to fear. You become more human, and that makes you harder to forget. The fourth habit is to stop needing approval and start choosing your circle, because power returns the moment you stop asking every room to choose you. This is one of the quietest traps in life. You may not call it approval-seeking. You may call it being friendly, flexible, open-minded, easy to get along with. And sometimes that is exactly what it is. But there is another version of it that slowly drains your dignity. It is the version where you bend too quickly. You laugh too easily at things that do not respect you. You stay in places where your spirit feels smaller because you want to be included. You keep proving your value to people who have already shown you they are not deeply aligned with you. And the strange thing is that approval can feel like connection, even when it is not. Someone laughs at your joke, replies to your message, invites you into the room, gives you a little attention, and for a moment, the nervous system relaxes. You feel chosen. You feel safe. But if your sense of worth depends on being selected by people who do not truly see you, then your peace will always live in someone else's hands. Epictetus was very clear about this kind of dependence. He taught that when your happiness depends on what another person thinks, gives, says, or withholds, you have placed your freedom outside yourself. And this is where approval becomes dangerous. It does not only make you want to be liked, it makes you easier to control. A person who needs approval too much can be led with silence, punished with distance, manipulated with praise, and pulled back into places he has already outgrown. So the shift is simple, but it requires courage. Stop asking, "Do they like me?" and start asking, "Do I respect what this connection asks me to become?" That question changes everything. It moves you from begging to be included into consciously choosing where your energy belongs. Because not every circle deserves your presence. Not every invitation is an honor. Not every person who accepts you is good for you. Sometimes being chosen by the wrong people is just another way of abandoning yourself. This does not mean you become arrogant. It does not mean you walk through life judging everyone from a distance. It means you stop treating access to your life as something people receive automatically just because they offered you attention. Your circle shapes your standards. It shapes your language, your habits, your nervous system, your idea of what is normal. If you keep surrounding yourself with people who mock your depth, drain your energy, or only accept the easiest version of you, then eventually you may start betraying the parts of yourself they do not know how to honor. Start watching how you feel around people. Do you feel more honest or more edited, more calm or more anxious, more alive or more performed? Do you leave the conversation feeling clearer, or do you leave carrying confusion, guilt, comparison, and noise? Your body often knows before your pride is ready to admit it. Pay attention to the relationships where you keep becoming a smaller version of yourself just to stay close. Then choose differently. Choose people who can handle your truth without trying to reduce it. Choose people who respect your growth without needing to compete with it. Choose people who do not require you to betray your standards as the price of belonging. And if your circle becomes smaller for a while, let it. A smaller circle with alignment is better than a crowded life where you feel alone inside your own performance. Because silent power is not needing every door to open. It is knowing which doors no longer deserve your knock. And when you stop chasing approval and start choosing your circle, your presence changes. You no longer enter relationships as someone waiting to be accepted. You enter them as someone who has already accepted the responsibility of protecting his own life. The fifth habit is to be intense without apology, because some people are not too much. They are simply untrained in how to carry their depth. There is a certain kind of person who feels life strongly. He does not love halfway. He does not think shallowly. He does not move through the world as if everything is light and disposable. His feelings have weight. His attention has heat. His dreams do not feel casual. When something matters, it matters deeply. And for much of his life, someone may have made him feel ashamed of that. Too sensitive, too serious, too passionate, too emotional, too much, so he learns to shrink. He lowers his voice when something moves him. He pretends not to care as much as he does. He hides his hunger for meaning behind a colder face. He tries to become easier, lighter, less complicated, less alive, because he's been taught that intensity makes people uncomfortable. And maybe it does. But the real question is not whether your depth makes some people uncomfortable. The real question is whether you are willing to abandon your fire just because others only know how to live near dimmer lights. The Stoics were not enemies of emotion in the shallow way people often imagine. They did not teach a person to become stone. They taught self-command. That difference matters. Marcus Aurelius did not try to erase the human heart. He tried to keep it from being dragged around by every impulse, every insult, every fear, every desire. In other words, the goal is not to kill your intensity. The goal is to give it discipline, because intensity without command can become chaos. Passion without direction can burn the person who carries it. Sensitivity without boundaries can turn every look, tone, delay, or rejection into a wound. But intensity with self-command becomes presence. It becomes focus. It becomes loyalty. It becomes courage. It becomes the kind of emotional depth that makes a person unforgettable, because you can feel that he is not half alive. This is where many people misunderstand themselves. They think the problem is that they feel too much, when the real problem is that they have not learned how to lead what they feel. Anger can become destruction, or it can become the strength to finally protect your dignity. Desire can become obsession, or it can become commitment to something meaningful. Sadness can become collapse, or it can become tenderness, art, wisdom, and compassion. The feeling itself is not always the enemy. The question is whether the feeling has a master. So do not apologize for having depth. Apologize when your depth becomes harm. Correct yourself when your fire becomes cruelty. Take responsibility when your intensity overwhelms people who did not deserve it. But do not confuse self-control with self-erasure. You are allowed to care deeply. You are allowed to want more from life than comfort and distraction. You are allowed to have a mind that searches for meaning and a heart that does not easily become numb. Start by giving your intensity a direction. Put your focus into work that matters. Put your passion into a craft, a mission, a relationship that is healthy enough to receive it. Put your emotional energy into discipline, creation, service, training, prayer, silence, movement, or truth. Do not let your fire spend itself on people who only provoke you, or on thoughts that only exhaust you, or on situations that keep turning your depth into anxiety. Because your intensity is not something to hide, it is something to refine. And when you learn to carry your depth with calm authority, you stop being the person who feels too much. You become the person whose presence makes shallow things feel less powerful. The sixth habit is to hold your standards without guilt, because self-respect is not real until it costs you the comfort of tolerating less than you deserve. Many people say they have standards, but what they really have are preferences. They prefer to be treated with respect, but they stay when disrespect becomes a pattern. They prefer honesty, but they keep making excuses for people who only tell the truth when it benefits them. They prefer peace, but they continue giving access to situations that make their nervous system feel like a battlefield. And because they do not want to seem demanding, difficult, or unforgiving, they slowly begin calling their own self-abandonment patience. But a standard that disappears under pressure is not yet a standard. It is a wish. The Stoics understood that character is built through what a person refuses to compromise. Epictetus taught that if you want to become free, you must stop handing your peace to things outside your control. But there is another layer to that idea. You must also stop handing your values to people who only respect them when they are convenient. A person who does not know his non-negotiables becomes easy to move. A little guilt moves him. A little silence moves him. A little fear of losing someone moves him. And soon, his life is no longer shaped by what he respects, but by what he is afraid to lose. This is where guilt becomes dangerous. Not healthy guilt, the kind that tells you when you have done something wrong, but false guilt, the guilt that appears when you finally protect yourself, the guilt that says you're selfish because you said no, the guilt that says you're harsh because you stopped giving chances to the same pattern, the guilt that says you should lower your standard one more time because someone might be disappointed by your self-respect. You have to learn the difference. Sometimes guilt is a moral signal, and sometimes guilt is just the emotional withdrawal symptom of no longer betraying yourself. This is why holding standards requires calm consistency, not speeches, not anger, not proving your worth through dramatic exits. Just a quiet refusal to keep participating in what repeatedly costs you your peace. If someone only gives half effort, you do not keep offering full access. If someone repeatedly crosses a line, you do not keep pretending the line is imaginary. If an environment keeps pulling you away from your values, you stop calling it loyalty and start calling it what it is, a place where you are becoming less yourself. And this is not about perfection. You are not looking for perfect people, perfect relationships or perfect conditions. Human beings will make mistakes. You will make mistakes. Love requires patience. Friendship requires grace. Growth requires room. But there is a difference between a mistake and a pattern. A mistake can be repaired with honesty, responsibility, and changed behavior. A pattern asks you to keep bleeding, while the other person keeps apologizing with words and repeating with actions. Hold your standards there. Hold them where the pattern keeps asking you to doubt what you know. Hold them when someone tries to make your limits sound cruel. Hold them when your loneliness starts negotiating with your dignity. Hold them when the old version of you wants to choose closeness at any cost, even if the cost is peace. Start with one non-negotiable. Maybe you will not accept repeated dishonesty. Maybe you will not stay in conversations where contempt is normal. Maybe you will not keep shrinking your dreams to make insecure people comfortable. Maybe you will not give your best energy to relationships that only take from you. Choose one standard and let your behavior prove that it is real. Because silent power is not loud rejection. It is quiet alignment. It is the moment your life starts showing that your peace has value, your time has value, your energy has value, and your presence is not something people can receive while repeatedly disrespecting the conditions that protect it. And when you hold your standards without guilt, you stop asking the world for permission to respect yourself. The seventh habit is to love from fullness, not from lack, because the most unforgettable love does not come from fear, hunger, or desperation. It comes from a person who has built enough of a life inside himself that love becomes an offering, not a rescue mission. Many people think they are loving deeply when they are actually clinging tightly. They give too much, too quickly. They ignore signs. They tolerate inconsistency. They confuse anxiety with passion, longing with connection, and emotional dependence with devotion. They say, "I just love hard." But sometimes what they mean is, "I am terrified of losing the person who makes me feel chosen." And when love is built on that fear, it stops feeling free. It becomes negotiation. It becomes tension. It becomes the quiet panic of needing someone else to keep proving that you are worth staying for. The Stoics did not teach a person to avoid love. That is a shallow misunderstanding. Marcus Aurelius wrote often about duty, affection, kindness, and the fragile nature of human life. But the Stoic lesson is that love becomes cleaner when it is not controlled by possession. You can love someone deeply without making them the owner of your peace. You can care without clinging. You can give without becoming empty. You can choose someone without turning them into the answer to every wound you have not healed. That is the difference between love from fullness and love from lack. Love from lack says, "Please complete me, or I will not know who I am." Love from fullness says, "I choose you from a life I am already responsible for." Love from lack gives to be secured. It over-explains, overextends, over-forgives, and slowly begins to disappear. Love from fullness gives because it has something real to give. It is warm but not desperate, loyal but not blind, open but not without standards. This is where many people become unforgettable, not because they chase harder, but because they stop chasing from emptiness. There is a different energy in a person who can love and still remain centered. They do not need to control every response. They do not need to read silence as abandonment. They do not need to prove their value by suffering more than they should. Their love has depth, but it also has dignity. And dignity changes the whole atmosphere of a relationship. But to love from fullness, you have to build a self you do not abandon the moment someone enters your life. You have to keep your routines, your values, your friendships, your body, your purpose, your silence, your standards. Not because love is less important than those things, but because healthy love needs a whole person to move through. If you give up your center to be close to someone, the relationship may become intense. But intensity without wholeness often becomes fear, wearing the name of love. So ask yourself honestly, when you love, do you become more yourself or less? Do you become calmer, clearer, more alive, more truthful? Or do you become anxious, performative, smaller, afraid to speak, afraid to need, afraid to lose? That question matters, because the right connection should not require the death of your inner life. It may challenge you, it may reveal you, it may ask you to grow, but it should not demand that you disappear. Start by returning love to its proper place. Let it be part of your life, not the entire proof of your worth. Let someone matter deeply without becoming your only source of meaning. Practice giving from overflow, not from panic. Practice choosing, not begging. Practice caring with open hands, not clenched fists. And when someone cannot meet you with maturity, do not turn their inability into a verdict on your value. Because love from lack often asks, how do I keep this person? But love from fullness asks a better question. Can I stay connected to myself while loving this person? That question is the beginning of emotional maturity. And when you learn to love from fullness, your presence changes. You become less frantic, less easy to manipulate, less willing to trade your peace for closeness. You stop loving as if you are starving. You begin loving as someone who is already whole. And maybe this is what makes a person silently powerful. Not the need to be seen, not the need to dominate, not the need to prove, explain, impress, or become unforgettable by force. Real presence is quieter than that. It comes from the person who has stopped negotiating with his own truth, just to be accepted by a world that often rewards masks. The Stoics understood that strength begins inside, not in the image, not in the applause, not in how many people approve of you, but in the way you govern yourself when pressure asks you to become false. In the way you remain loyal to your values when the room rewards performance. In the way you carry your flaws without shame, your depth without apology, your standards without guilt, and your love without losing yourself. Because the world may admire a polished version of you for a moment, but it remembers the real version much longer. The version that does not beg to be chosen. The version that can grow without becoming fake. The version that can say no without hatred, love without desperation, and stand alone without feeling empty. So start there. Stop editing yourself for rooms that cannot hold your truth. Choose one standard and live it. Own one part of yourself you have been hiding. Give your energy to people who meet you with respect, depth, and alignment. And love from a place that does not require you to disappear. If this episode gave you something to reflect on, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who is learning to become quietly strong in a loud world. Because being unforgettable is not about becoming louder. It is about becoming real enough that your presence does not need permission to be felt.